After pressing a final kiss to my husband's hand, I walked down the hospital hall struggling to hold myself together until I passed two nurses near the break room. One whispered, "She still doesn't know, does she?" The other answered, "No. And if she finds out, we're done." I froze, my heart sank, and the room where my husband had been was now locked. The day Ben died, my world shattered. But what truly broke me wasn't just losing my husband, it was the monstrous secrets he'd taken to his grave, secrets whispered by nurses and delivered in a text message after he was declared brain dead. They thought I'd never find out, but grief didn't make me retreat. It made me dangerous. I remember reaching for Ben's hand that day. It was cold. Too cold. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the hospital room had fallen silent hours ago, replaced by the hushed, almost reverent whispers of nurses and the occasional squeak of shoes on linoleum. "It's time, Mrs. Parker," the doctor had said gently, his voice full of practiced sympathy. "You can say your goodbyes now." I could only nod, my throat seized by a grief so profound it stole my voice. Just 3 days. 3 days ago, he'd kiss me goodbye before work, complaining about a dull headache. By lunchtime, he was in the ER. By evening, in a coma. And now, gone. A massive stroke at 35. It felt like a cruel joke, a cosmic injustice. "Can we have a moment alone?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. The room cleared, leaving me utterly alone with him. I sat by the bed, tracing the familiar contours of his face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar above his eyebrow from a childhood fall, his dark hair still beautifully messy, just the way I loved it. "Ben," I whispered, a desperate plea. "I don't know how to do this without you." I brushed my thumb across his cold knuckles, memories flashing, those hands holding mine at college graduation, at our wedding, when we bought our first house. "I love you," I told him. "I've always loved you." I leaned down, pressing my lips to his forehead. It was cold. So cold. When I finally stood, my legs felt like crumbling columns. Nurse Melissa, badge visible, watched me with a sort of pity. "Take your time, Mrs. Parker." I just nodded, clutching my purse. "Thank you for everything." I moved toward the door, my body on autopilot, my mind a swirling fog of disbelief. Ben couldn't be gone. Not my Ben. As I stumbled into the corridor, two nurses were huddled near the station, heads bent close, murmuring. I probably wouldn't have even registered them, lost as I was in my own personal hell, but then they fell silent. Instantly, a cold dread seeped into my bones. "She still doesn't know, does she?" one whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," the other replied, tight with tension. "And if she finds out, we're finished." I froze mid-step, utterly invisible to them. What didn't I know? What were they hiding? Their eyes snapped up, widening in alarm as they finally saw me. They scattered like startled birds, one suddenly engrossed in a patient chart, the other hurrying off down the hall as if the devil himself was on her heels. I turned back, a strange instinct pulling me toward Ben's room, but the door was already shut. A stark sign read, "Cleaning in progress. No entry." Two orderlies stood guard outside, their faces impassive, their postures stiff. A third nurse, Tanya, approached me, her hand gentle on my elbow. "Mrs. Parker, you really should go home. You've been through enough." Her voice held kindness, yes, but beneath it, I sensed a powerful urgency, a subtle push to get me out of there. "Can I see his chart?" I heard myself ask, surprised by the sudden, desperate clarity in my own voice. I want to know what his last hours were like. If he was in pain, if he woke up at all while I wasn't here." Tanya's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "You'll have to wait until morning, Mrs. Parker. There's been a delay in documentation. Hospital protocol." Her words felt too rehearsed. Was he conscious at all before he passed? I pressed, not knowing why this suddenly mattered so fiercely. "No, Mrs. Parker." He wasn't responsive after admission. Her eyes darted away from mine, a telltale flicker. He wouldn't have known. I nodded, trying to accept her words, but a gut feeling screamed that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. It was like walking into your own home and sensing something's been moved, but you can't quite put your finger on what. "Emma." I turned to see Julia, Ben's sister, rushing down the hall, her hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. She pulled me into a tight hug. I came as soon as I could. I can't believe he's gone. Julia had always been Ben's emotional opposite. He was reserved, she was expressive. He planned, she improvised. They'd grown apart, only speaking on holidays and birthdays. It happened so fast, I said, my voice hollow. Julia pulled back, confusion clouding her tear-streaked face. But that doesn't make sense. He texted me this morning at 6 a.m. He sounded fine. He said he was feeling better, that the doctors might even release him soon. Tanya, who had been lingering nearby, took an involuntary step closer. That's impossible. Mr. Parker was declared brain dead at 5:04 a.m. Julia pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically through messages. Look, she demanded, thrusting the screen toward us. 6:07 a.m. *, feeling better? Doc say might go home soon. Tell Emma not to worry. *, I stared at the screen, at the message from my supposedly brain-dead husband. Tanya's face had gone utterly pale. There must be some mistake, she insisted, a frantic edge to her voice. Maybe the timestamp is wrong. Or what? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the brewing storm inside me, a maelstrom of confusion and rising suspicion. Mrs. Parker, you've been through a terrible ordeal. Grief can make us look for answers, for something to make sense of a senseless tragedy. But sometimes, things just happen. Her voice was eerily rehearsed, like she delivered that line countless times before. I need to go, I whispered, backing away slowly. I'll drive you, Julia offered, but I shook my head. I need to be alone. The drive home was a blur, my mind a relentless loop of those whispered words. *, she still doesn't know. If she finds out, we're finished. *, and then the chilling text, sent to Julia after Ben was supposedly gone. Our house, no, my house now, was dark and silent when I arrived. I didn't even bother with the lights, stumbling my way to our bedroom. Everything was exactly as we'd left it 3 days ago, Ben's watch on the nightstand, his book face down on his side of the bed, his pajama pants tossed casually over a chair. I collapsed onto the bed, curling around his pillow. It still smelled like him, a ghost of comfort. I pulled his wedding ring from my pocket. They'd given it to me in a small plastic bag with his wallet. Why does this feel wrong? I whispered into the crushing darkness. What weren't they telling me, Ben? The silence offered no answers, only deepened the dread. Morning arrived in agonizing fragments, patches of indifferent sunlight on the floor, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the mundane slam of a car door. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of a waking nightmare where Ben was alive one moment, gone the next. I pushed myself upright, my body aching from the night spent in a rigid, fetal curl. The bedside clock read 9:47 a.m. In normal times, I'd be at school, teaching my 4th graders about fractions or state capitals. Normal times when Ben was alive. I forced myself to stand, to move. In the bathroom, I splashed icy water on my face, staring at my reflection, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, skin starkly pale. I looked like a stranger. Ben's hospital bag sat untouched by the front door, just where I'd dropped it. I knelt beside it now, unzipping it slowly. His clothes were inside, neatly folded, jeans, the button-down shirt he'd been wearing when the stroke hit, his belt, his socks. But his phone wasn't there. Neither was his smartwatch. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I frowned, desperately trying to recall if I'd seen them at the hospital. I'd packed that bag myself when they admitted him. I distinctly remembered putting both the phone and watch inside. I called the hospital, navigating their infuriating automated system until I finally reached someone in patient services. I'd like to request my husband's medical records, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Ben Parker. He passed away yesterday morning. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Parker. We can certainly process that request. It typically takes 5 to 10 business days for medical records to be released. 5 to 10 days? I repeated, a cold wave washing over me. That seems long. There's an internal review process for all deceased patient records, the woman explained, her tone professionally distant. It's standard procedure. Something about her answer felt off, but I couldn't quite articulate why. I also can't find some of my husband's personal items. I pressed his phone and smartwatch. They weren't in his bag. I heard the click of a keyboard. I don't see any electronics listed in our inventory of Mr. Parker's belongings. Everything we had was returned to you. My voice rose. But I'm certain they were in his bag. I put them there myself. I understand your concern, Mrs. Parker, but our records indicate all personal items were returned. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, no, I cut her off quickly. That's fine. Thank you. I hung up, that creeping sense of wrongness now a roaring alarm. Where were Ben's devices? And why did his medical records need such a lengthy, secret, internal review? My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. An unknown number. Hello, Mrs. Parker, a woman's voice, hushed and urgent, said. This is Tanya from the hospital. The nurse from yesterday. My heart leaped. Yes. I shouldn't be calling you. I could lose my job. Her voice shook, but she pushed through. But I saw something in your husband's chart. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. My heart began to pound against my ribs. What? He was awake, Mrs. Parker. Yesterday morning before. She paused, taking a shaky breath. He asked for you specifically. He was agitated, trying to tell the staff something. A wave of raw betrayal washed over me. Why wouldn't they tell me this? Asterisk why? Asterisk I have to go. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Ben had been conscious. He had asked for me. And no one, not a single soul, had told me. I needed to make sense of this. To organize these scattered fragments of information that were beginning to feel less like tragic coincidence and more like something chillingly deliberate. I found a notebook in Ben's desk drawer, a stark, blank canvas. On the first page, I scrawled, "What happened to Ben?" Underneath, I listed the terrifying anomalies. Asterisk stroke on Tuesday. Declared brain dead Thursday, 5:04 a.m. text to Julia. Thursday, 6:07 a.m. nurses whispering about something I didn't know. Ben's missing phone and watch. Ben was conscious and asking for me. Asterisk the facts stared back, disconnected, yet screaming their interconnectedness. My phone buzzed. A text from Julia. Can we talk? Something doesn't feel right about this. We met at a coffee shop downtown an hour later. Julia looked as sleep-deprived and haunted as I felt. Ben called me Tuesday night, she said, stirring her untouched coffee, her voice shaky. After they admitted him. He sounded scared, Emma. Not about the stroke, about something else. He said he had something important to tell you. That he'd messed up. Messed up how? I demanded, my brow furrowed. He wouldn't say, just that he needed to make things right. That doesn't sound like Ben, I mumbled, a new unease stirring. I know, Julia leaned forward, her eyes wide with worry. Which makes me think it was really important. After coffee, I drove to our bank, needing to start the grim, unavoidable process of untangling our finances. The banker was sympathetic, her voice a practiced balm. You'll want to print out recent statements, she advised, for taxes and estate purposes. I nodded, grateful for the small anchors of clear instruction. But when she handed me our credit card statement from the past month, my eyes scanned it automatically, and I froze. Charges I didn't recognize. Small ones mostly. A gas station across town, a restaurant I'd never heard of. But one stood out like a blazing neon sign. Peterson's Jewelry, $3, $8.50, just 2 days before Ben's stroke. Is something wrong? The banker asked, her voice concerned. No, I said quickly, stuffing the statement into my purse, just trying to keep track of everything. My mind was racing. Ben and I shared everything. We had an unbreakable rule from our newlywed days. No purchase over $100 without discussion. What had he bought for nearly $4,000 without telling me? Peterson's Jewelry was a small, elegant shop downtown, with a tasteful green awning. I'd walked past it 100 times, never once thought to go inside. The bell chimed softly as I entered, a sound that now felt ominous. A kind-faced man with glasses looked up from behind the counter. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I approached, suddenly uncertain, my voice faltering. My husband, Ben Parker, made a purchase here recently. Tuesday. Recognition flickered in the jeweler's eyes. Yes, of course. He picked up a custom piece. He smiled, oblivious to my growing dread. A beautiful choice. Can you tell me what it was? My voice was barely a whisper. A ring, he said. White gold with a sapphire center stone. He said it was a surprise for someone named Sophie. The floor tilted beneath me. Sophie. I had never heard that name from Ben. Not once. Are you all right, ma'am? Fine, I managed, my voice strained. Did he say anything else about this? Sophie? The jeweler hesitated. Only that it was important to get it right. That she'd been waiting a long time. I thanked him, my mind spinning, a horrifying tableau forming. Ben had bought another woman an expensive ring. He'd kept it secret. He'd told Julia he'd messed up. The pieces were falling into a pattern I absolutely did not want to see. At home, I sat at Ben's desk, staring at his laptop. We knew each other's passwords. It was another early marriage agreement. No secrets. Except, apparently, there had been secrets. I typed in his password, my fingers trembling. Access denied. He'd changed it. I tried every variation I could think of. Nothing. Finally, I clicked Forgot Password, and the reset link was sent to his recovery email, which, ironically, forwarded to my phone. The screen loaded, and Ben's inbox appeared. Hundreds of emails, mostly work-related. But right at the top, unread, sent just yesterday morning, an email from Sophie Allen. Subject: You didn't tell her, did you? My finger hovered, a war of fear and anger raging within me. I clicked. The email opened, revealing not just one message, but an entire thread spanning months. 8 months, to be exact. I scrolled to the very beginning, my heart pounding a frantic drum in my ears. Ben, I know we agreed to keep our distance, but Claire asked about you again yesterday. She's starting to ask questions I don't know how to answer. Claire. I kept reading message after message, unfolding a story I knew absolutely nothing about. Ben's replies were careful, measured. I'm trying to figure out the right time, Sophie. Emma deserves to know, but I need to do this right. This wasn't what I had expected. These didn't read like love letters. They were heavy with obligation, with shared burdens. And then I saw it. The name, again and again. Claire. Claire lost another tooth. Claire's teacher says she's reading above grade level. Claire wants to know why her daddy doesn't live with us. Asterisk her daddy? Ben, asterisk a photo attachment caught my eye, dated 3 months ago. I clicked it open and the entire world stopped. There was Ben, smiling broadly, kneeling beside a little girl at a playground. She had his eyes. His dimple when she smiled. The caption read simply, "First day at the park with Daddy." The laptop slid from my trembling hands, clattering onto the desk. Ben had a child. A daughter. And he had hidden her existence from me for our entire marriage. No. I gasped. No. I reached for my phone, dialing Julia's number without even thinking. Emma, what's wrong? Her voice was instantly alert. Did you know? I demanded, shocked by the raw anger lacing my own words. About Ben's daughter? Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, Julia's quiet voice. What daughter? Claire. He has a daughter with a woman named Sophie. He's been seeing them, spending time with them, my voice cracked, buying them jewelry. Oh my God, Julia breathed, the sound torn from her. That's what he meant. What? Last Christmas, at your house. I overheard him on the phone in the backyard. He said, if Emma ever finds out, she'll leave me. I thought he'd lost money or something, but this. I hung up without saying goodbye. I needed to see her. This Sophie, this woman who had shared a secret life with my husband. Finding her wasn't difficult. Sophie Allen was on Facebook, her profile semi-public. She was pretty, in an understated way, chestnut hair, kind eyes, nothing like me. Her profile listed her as a single mom to 6-year-old Claire, an elementary school teacher living in Westfield, just 20 minutes from our house. 6 years old. That meant Ben had known her before we were married, gotten her pregnant, then left her to marry me. No. That painful timeline simply didn't make sense. I drove to Westfield that afternoon, Sophie's address pulled from a property records search now programmed into my GPS. Her house was small but meticulously kept, a bicycle resting on the front lawn, vibrant chalk drawings decorating the driveway. I parked across the street, my hands tight on the steering wheel, not entirely sure what I planned to do. Confront her? Demand answers? Ask to see the child my husband had kept secret? As I sat there, paralyzed, the front door opened. A woman, Sophie, stepped onto the porch. She called something over her shoulder, and then a little girl burst through the doorway, her backpack bouncing as she ran to her mother. Claire, Ben's daughter. The resemblance was unmistakable now that I saw her in motion, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the animated gestures as she spoke. Before I could think better of it, I was out of the car and crossing the street, propelled by an unstoppable force. Sophie noticed me approaching, her smile dissolving as she instinctively pulled Claire closer. "Can I help you?" she asked, a deep weariness in her voice. "I'm Emma," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Emma Parker, Ben's wife." Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a complex emotion I couldn't quite name. Not guilt, not fear, but something like profound resignation. "Claire, honey, go inside and start your homework. I'll be in soon." The little girl looked at me with open curiosity before nodding and disappearing into the house. Sophie crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I wondered if you'd come. I'm truly sorry about Ben. Did you know he was dying?" I blurted out, the question raw. "Is that what the ring was for?" She frowned. "What ring?" "The sapphire ring. He bought it for you 2 days before his stroke." Sophie shook her head, a soft, emphatic gesture. "He didn't buy me any ring, Emma. It wasn't like that between us." "Then what was it like?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. She sighed. "Can we sit, please?" We settled onto her porch steps, a careful, deliberate distance between us. "Ben and I dated briefly, years ago," she began, her voice soft. "Before he met you. It didn't work out, and we went our separate ways. I didn't even know I was pregnant until after you two were already engaged." "And you didn't tell him?" I interrupted, a fresh wave of shock. "I tried once. He was so happy, so focused on your wedding." She looked down at her hands. "I decided to do it on my own. But he found out." She nodded. 3 years ago, Claire had a medical emergency, a severe allergic reaction. The hospital needed family medical history. I called him in desperation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. He came right away. And after that, he wanted to be in her life. Behind my back, I said, the hurt in my voice raw and sharp. "He was going to tell you. Many times. But he was scared that you'd leave him, that you wouldn't understand." Sophie looked at me directly, her gaze intense. "At first, yes. But later, it was more complicated. He wasn't hiding Claire out of shame, Emma. He was scared. Someone else didn't want her to exist." The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. "What does that mean?" But Sophie was already standing. "I've said too much. Claire and we've already lost Ben. We can't afford to lose anything else." She went inside, leaving me utterly alone, questions multiplying like shadows in the fading light. I drove home in a daze, Sophie's chilling words echoing in my mind. Someone else didn't want her to exist. What did that even mean? Who would care about Ben having a child from a previous relationship? Back home, I pulled open the bottom drawer of Ben's desk, where he kept old journals and notebooks. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I needed to understand who my husband truly was. Near the back, I found a worn leather travel journal, dated 3 years ago, precisely when Sophie said Ben had discovered Claire's existence. I flipped past pages of mundane work notes until an entry caught my eye. April 18th. Saw her again today. Same man watching from the car. I think I've made things worse by going back. Need to be more careful. He hadn't named names, but the timing aligned perfectly. I continued reading, finding scattered entries that now took on a terrifying new meaning. May 2nd. Meeting with and about the arrangement. Don't trust him. But what choice do I have? And then, June 15th. Transfer complete. This has to work. Too much at stake now. My phone chimed, vibrating in my hand. An unknown number. This is Sophie. That black SUV is back. The same one Ben warned me about. I'm scared. I called her immediately, my heart leaping into my throat. What SUV? Who's watching you? I don't know, she said, her voice a terrified whisper. Ben noticed it a month ago. Someone parked outside my house or Claire's school. He even confronted the driver once, but the man denied following us. Did Ben say who he thought it was? He mentioned something about the health fund he was working with. Said someone there was too invested. I didn't understand what she meant. Health fund. Ben worked in finance, specializing in healthcare investments. He mentioned a special project over the past year, something about a private medical research foundation. I'd always assumed it was just extra work. Sophie, I asked, a sudden cold realization forming, what school does Claire attend? Briarwood Elementary. Why? I opened my laptop, searching for Briarwood. It was a private school, and prominently displayed at the bottom of its website, among its benefactors, was the logo for the Westlake Health Innovation Fund. The very place Ben had been consulting. The connection hit me like a physical blow. Ben hadn't just been visiting his secret daughter. He'd been funneling money to her school through his work with this mysterious health fund. But why? Why would that put them in danger? The next morning, I drove to the Westlake Health Innovation Fund offices. The building was sleek, modern, with tinted windows and a minimalist lobby that felt more like a fortress than a workplace. I approached the reception desk, my confidence entirely forced. Good morning. I'm Lisa Parker, Ben Parker's assistant. I need to collect some files from his office. The receptionist, a perfectly coiffed woman, frowned. I wasn't aware Mr. Parker had an assistant. Oh, I usually work remotely, I chirped, hoping she couldn't hear the frantic pounding of my heart. But since his passing, I've been asked to gather his materials. I'll need to call upstairs for approval. While she dialed, I scanned the lobby. Security cameras in every corner. Visitor badges with QR codes that lit up at the elevator. Signs stating all visitors must sign confidentiality agreements before proceeding. This wasn't just tight security. This was paranoia. I'm sorry, the receptionist said, hanging up. Someone will be down to speak with you. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and a man in an impeccable suit emerged, his smile not quite reaching his cold eyes. I'm Nathan Wells, Chief Security Officer, he said, extending a hand that felt oddly limp. You must be confused. Ben Parker didn't have an assistant. My face flushed crimson. I'm not his assistant. I'm his wife, Emma Parker. Nathan's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something unreadable. Mrs. Parker, my sincerest condolences for your loss. But I'm afraid I can't allow you access to Mr. Parker's workspace. His contract included strict confidentiality provisions that survive his death. What was he working on here? I asked, cutting directly to the point. I'm not at liberty to discuss that, Mrs. Parker. And legally, you're no longer involved with any of it. His tone softened, artificially. Ben's personal effects from his desk have already been packed up. I can have them sent to you. That would be appreciated, I said, swallowing a bitter wave of frustration. As I turned to leave, Nathan added, Mrs. Parker, Ben was a valuable member of our team. His dedication to certain projects will be hard to replace. The way he emphasized that one word, dedication, sent an icy chill straight through me. Back in my car, I called Sophie again. What medical condition does Claire have? Why? Her voice was instantly guarded. Please, Sophie, it's important. She hesitated. She has Kaplan-Mercer syndrome. It's incredibly rare, a genetic disorder that affects her immune system and development. Kaplan-Mercer syndrome, I'd never heard of it. The health fund Ben worked with, did they ever reach out to you about Claire? Once, about 2 years ago. They wanted to enroll her in some clinical study. I refused. It felt too experimental, too risky. The pieces were starting to align, forming a horrifying picture I could barely comprehend. Ben's secretive behavior, the money trail, his palpable fear. It was all connected to Claire. My phone rang again. An unknown number. Mrs. Parker, this is Thomas Grayson. I was your husband's attorney. I frowned, utterly confused. Ben and I shared a lawyer for our wills and house purchase. Our attorney is Richard Simmons, I stated, suspicion rising. I was retained by your husband privately approximately 2 years ago, he explained. He left specific instructions that in the event of his death, I was to contact you after a brief waiting period. My grip tightened on the phone. What instructions? He left an envelope for you. He was quite explicit that it should be delivered in person and only to you. I met Thomas Grayson at his office an hour later. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ben came to me in a state of considerable distress, he explained, retrieving a sealed envelope from his desk safe. He wouldn't specify what troubled him, only that he needed to ensure certain information would reach you if something happened to him. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands. My name was written on it in Ben's familiar, looping handwriting. Did he seem afraid? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas considered this. Not afraid, exactly. More determined. Like a man making contingency plans he desperately hoped never to use. I thanked him, my mind buzzing, and returned to my car before opening the envelope. Inside were three things: a small, unassuming key, a hand-drawn map that appeared to show part of the hospital, and a note. Asterisk, Emma, if you're reading this, then I waited too long to tell you. I'm sorry. For everything. The key opens locker 224 in the hospital's East Wing staff area. What you find there will explain better than I ever could. I love you. Always have, always will. Asterisk, I drove straight to the hospital, Ben's hand-drawn map my only guide to a staff-only storage area in the East Wing. Using a service elevator, just as he'd indicated, I avoided the main areas where I might be recognized, my heart thrumming. Locker 224 stood at the end of a quiet, forgotten corridor. The key slid in perfectly. Inside were files, USB drives, and a handwritten letter lying on top like a final confession. I unfolded it, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. Asterisk, Emma, they didn't want her to live. I fought it. I did everything I could. The fund isn't what it seems. They're using children like Claire for something beyond medical research. When I found out, I tried to pull her out safely. They threatened me. Threatened Sophie. Said they'd withdraw all treatment if I exposed them. I had to play along. Had to keep you in the dark to protect you. If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. Get these files to Dr. Rachel Hansen at the State Medical Board. She's the only one I trust. Forgive me, Ben. Asterisk, I sank to the sterile hospital floor, the files scattering around me like fallen leaves. Grief and a burning, icy rage collided in my chest, a maelstrom of emotions. The nurse's whispered words, she still doesn't know, does she? No. And if she finds out, we're finished, now made horrifying, chilling sense. They weren't talking about an affair. They were talking about whatever had really happened to Ben. Whatever he had discovered that had cost him his life. In that cold, sterile hospital hallway, surrounded by my husband's desperate final message, I made a silent, unbreakable promise. I would uncover every single secret Ben had died protecting, no matter what it cost me. By the way, if you're still with me on this wild, heartbreaking journey, please hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them. My eyes burned and my head throbbed, but I couldn't stop. I spent the entire night reading every document in Ben's locker. Each page I turned revealed another chilling layer of a nightmare I could barely comprehend. Ben's letter was only the beginning. He had kept meticulous records of everything: emails, meeting notes, even recorded phone conversations. The full, brutal truth was laid out in his careful handwriting, each detail more shocking than the last. Claire, it turned out, had been diagnosed with Kaplan-Mercer syndrome at age 3. It was rare, potentially fatal, with no FDA-approved treatments. Sophie had struggled desperately to find specialists who even recognized the condition, let alone knew how to treat it. Then, Westlake Health Innovation Fund had reached out, seemingly by coincidence. They were running a clinical trial for a new, experimental treatment. They said Claire would be perfect. Sophie, uncomfortable with the experimental protocol and the mountains of non-disclosure agreements they'd pushed at her, had refused. That's when Ben stepped in. Without Sophie's knowledge, he'd used his connections at work to enroll Claire in the study under modified paperwork. He forged Sophie's signature, falsified addresses, created an entire fictional backstory for how Claire came to the program. And it had worked. Claire started receiving treatments. Her condition improved dramatically. But 6 months in, Ben discovered something that changed everything. The fund wasn't just studying these children. They were using them, testing boundary-pushing treatments that hadn't gone through any proper channels. The children showing the most promise were being groomed for something called Phase 3, the horrifying details of which Ben had been unable to uncover. When he tried to withdraw Claire from the program, they threatened to expose his fraud. Worse, they said they'd ensure Claire never received medical treatment anywhere again. They had the connections to make it happen. So, Ben had made a devil's bargain, silence in exchange for Claire's continued treatment. He'd become an unwilling accomplice, funneling money through legitimate-looking channels, even helping them recruit other desperate families, all while keeping everything hidden from me to protect us both. The sun was rising as I finished reading, casting long, accusing shadows across our living room floor. I felt hollow, scraped out, utterly raw. The husband I thought I knew had been living a double life, not of infidelity, but of desperate choices and profound moral compromise. I called Sophie. "I know everything," I said when she answered, my voice flat. About Claire's condition, about what Ben did to get her into the program. Silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. "He told you," she finally asked, her voice tight. "He left documents, letters, everything." I paused. "Did you know what he did?" "That he enrolled her without your consent." "I found out last month," she said, a bitter edge to her voice. I was furious. I threatened to go public, to report him and the fund. He begged me to wait. Said he was gathering evidence, building a case. He just needed time. Time he didn't get. "The ring," I said suddenly, the memory resurfacing. "The sapphire ring he bought. It wasn't for you, was it?" "No," Sophie said softly, a tremor in her voice. "It was for Claire. Her birthstone. He wanted to give her something permanent, something that would last." She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew why. "In case he wasn't around. We need to talk in person," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't over." I met Sophie at a park the next day. Claire was at school, the very school Ben had helped fund, I now realized, with a fresh wave of grim understanding. We sat on a bench, watching other children play, our voices low, almost conspiratorial. "How is she?" I asked. "Better than she's been in years," Sophie admitted, a flicker of fierce hope in her eyes. "The treatments, whatever they are, they're working. Her immune system is actually functioning. She's growing normally. She can run and play like other kids." "At what cost?" I whispered, the words heavy. Sophie looked at me sharply. "What would you have done? Let her suffer? Die?" "That's not what I meant," I countered, my voice tight. "Ben believed they're using these children for something beyond treatment. Something dangerous." "Then why didn't he stop it?" "Because he was trapped," I said. "They had leverage over him. He was afraid for Claire." Sophie's gaze drifted to the playground, where a little girl was confidently climbing the monkey bars. Her face hardened with determination. "Claire doesn't know any of this. She just knows that she feels better, and that," her voice caught, "that her dad visited sometimes and brought her presents." "Do you have copies of any paperwork from the fund? Anything you signed initially?" "Just the rejection letter I sent when I refused to enroll her." "Why?" "Because I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." After meeting Sophie, I drove directly to Children's Medical Center. Dr. Rosenthal, according to Ben's notes, was Claire's primary physician and the key liaison between families and the fund. I found his office on the 4th floor. Outside his door, I hesitated, then knocked. "Come in," a voice called. Dr. Rosenthal was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with kind eyes that held a profound weariness. His office walls were covered with vibrant children's drawings. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Emma Parker," I said, Ben Parker's wife. Recognition flickered in his eyes, immediately followed by a guarded caution. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Parker. How can I assist you today?" "I'd like to talk about Claire Allen." His expression didn't change, but his hands stilled on the desk. "I'm afraid I can't discuss patients with non-family members." "I know about the Westlake program," I cut in, my voice sharp. "I know Ben helped get Claire enrolled without proper consent, and I know the fund is doing something that goes far beyond standard treatment protocols." Dr. Rosenthal glanced at his closed door, then back at me. Mrs. Parker, I understand you're grieving, but these are serious allegations. They're not allegations. They're facts. Facts that Ben documented extensively before his death. He was silent for a long, tense moment. What exactly do you want from me? The truth. Is Claire in danger? He sighed heavily. Sometimes helping someone means coloring outside the lines, Mrs. Parker. The treatments these children receive aren't approved through conventional channels because conventional channels move too slowly for kids like Claire. So, you falsify records, coerce families, threaten people who try to speak out? I treat my patients, he said firmly, meeting my gaze. What the fund does with their data, how they secure their funding, that's beyond my control. Is it? I challenged. Or do you just look the other way because the results justify the means? He stood abruptly. I think you should leave, Mrs. Parker. I have patients waiting. One more question, I said, remaining seated, holding his gaze. What is Phase 3? Dr. Rosenthal's face blanched. I don't know what you're talking about. But I could see, clearly, in his eyes, that he did. And it utterly frightened him. I left the hospital and drove directly to Claire's school, parking across the street. As children poured out at dismissal, Claire was easy to spot. Ben's eyes, Ben's smile, as she ran to where Sophie waited. She looked healthy, happy. Whatever dark secrets churned beneath the surface of the fund, whatever moral lines had been crossed, the treatment was undeniably working. Was it worth it? The deception, the compromise, the constant fear. As I watched Claire climb into Sophie's car, laughing at something her mother said, I could finally understand why Ben had thought so. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the cost was still rising. 2 days later, Sophie called in a panic. They've dropped Claire from the program, she cried, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Someone leaked information about unauthorized participants, and they're doing an internal audit. Claire's been removed from treatment, effective immediately. My stomach plummeted. What did they say? Just that there were irregularities in our paperwork that needed to be addressed. That Claire's participation is suspended indefinitely. She took a shuddering breath. Emma, without those treatments, her condition could regress. Everything she's gained could be lost. My mind flashed to Ben's desperate note. Asterisk, they didn't want her to live. I fought it. I did everything I could. Asterisk, what if exposing the truth meant Claire would suffer? Was justice worth a child's health, her very life? I'll call you back, I managed to say. That night, I sat at Ben's desk, surrounded by his incriminating files, torn between two impossible choices: expose the fund's unethical practices and risk Claire's health, or stay silent and let them continue using vulnerable children for whatever Phase 3 truly entailed. Ben hadn't found a way out of this maze. Had his death been the price of trying? My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mrs. Parker. My name is Travis Harmon. I was a colleague of your husband's. We need to talk. We met at a nondescript diner off the highway, a place deliberately chosen to be far from anyone connected to Westlake. Travis Harmon was in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. I worked with Ben on the initial Westlake partnership, he explained, his coffee untouched. I was the whistleblower who exposed their previous fund's tactics 3 years ago. Previous fund? Travis nodded grimly. They've operated under different names. Westlake is just the latest iteration. They find a legitimate medical need, rare diseases with no established treatments, and use it as a shield for their real operations. Which are what exactly? I asked, leaning forward, my voice barely a whisper. He glanced around the diner before continuing in an even lower voice. Developing biological enhancements that go far beyond treating disease. Military applications mostly. But they need human subjects, and children are ideal. Their systems are more adaptable. That's monstrous, I whispered, a chill running down my spine. It is. And nearly impossible to prove because they hide behind layers of legitimate research. The treatments work. The children do get better, so families don't ask questions. Ben tried to expose them, I said, more a statement than a question. Travis's expression softened. Ben was caught in the middle. He discovered what was happening after Claire was already enrolled. They had him cornered, expose them and lose Claire's treatment, or help them and keep her alive. He paused. He chose a third option. He began gathering evidence, building a case that would be too strong to ignore. And they found out, I finished, a terrible certainty settling in. He nodded. I believe so. Ben contacted me the night before his stroke. Said he had everything we needed to shut them down for good. I thought of Ben's missing phone and watch. They took his devices from the hospital. His evidence. Not all of it, Travis said, a glint in his eye. Ben was smarter than that. He kept backups. That's what I need your help to find. For the next week, Travis and I worked methodically, relentlessly, through everything Ben had left behind. The files from the locker, his home office, every digital account we could access. We meticulously built a timeline of events, cross-referencing each damning piece of evidence. Sophie joined our efforts, bringing every document she had related to Claire's condition and treatment. Her initial hesitation had hardened into fierce determination. I want to do this the right way, she declared. Or we keep running forever. We were making undeniable progress when Travis received a troubling phone call. That was my contact at the medical licensing board, he said, hanging up, his face grim. Someone's been asking questions about Claire's case. Who specifically? They wouldn't say, but shortly after, Claire's doctor received an official notice questioning her treatment history. That evening, Sophie called in a panic. There's a black SUV parked outside my house again. They've been there for hours. I drove to her house immediately. By the time I arrived, the SUV was gone, but Sophie was still visibly shaken. Claire keeps asking when she'll get her medicine again, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what to tell her. We're close, I promised, trying to instill a confidence I barely felt. We just need a little more time. The next day, a local reporter named Rita Mendoza reached out to me. She'd been investigating Westlake for months after receiving anonymous tips about irregularities in their clinical trials. I heard whispers about a patient named Claire, she explained when we met in a coffee shop far from the hospital, and about a financial analyst who was asking too many questions. My husband, I said, a grim acknowledgement. She nodded. I'd like to help, but I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I shared a carefully selected portion of what we discovered, enough to give her context without compromising our evidence or putting Claire at immediate risk. This is bigger than I thought, Rita said, her eyes wide. And more dangerous. Are you sure you want to pursue this? I don't have a choice, I told her, my voice unwavering. Neither does Claire. That night, I returned home to find a letter from my school district. My teaching position was being reviewed due to financial irregularities in my classroom expense reports that had never, ever been questioned before. They were coming after me now. The next day, Travis obtained something invaluable, an audio recording from an anonymous source inside Westlake. Ben's voice was unmistakable, tense and desperate, arguing with a man identified only as director. Asterisk, you can't pull her from the program. Asterisk, Ben pleaded. Asterisk, she needs these treatments. Asterisk, then sign the Phase 3 authorization, the director replied, his voice chillingly cold. Asterisk, it's a simple choice, Parker. You either sign this, or she dies off the program. You choose. Asterisk, Ben's voice was raw with desperation. Asterisk, you're asking me to consent to something without telling me what it is. Asterisk, asterisk, we're asking you to trust the process that's kept Claire alive for 2 years. Your choice. Asterisk, the recording ended there. Travis looked grim. This is what we needed. Proof of coercion. It's not enough, I said, the words heavy. We need to know what Phase 3 actually is. With Rita's invaluable help, we scheduled an emergency court hearing. Judge Eleanor Winters, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense approach, agreed to see us privately, acknowledging the sensitive nature of the case and the potential risk to a minor. We'll push for Claire's immediate reinstatement and treatment, Travis explained as we prepared. But we'll also present evidence of the fund's coercive practices and demand an independent investigation. The night before the hearing, Sophie called, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Someone slashed my tires, she said, all 4. And they left a note on my door. What did it say? It said, asterisk, she's not worth it. Neither are you, asterisk, a cold, searing rage ignited in my chest. Stay with a friend tonight, I ordered, my voice hard. Don't tell anyone where you're going. We'll pick you up in the morning." As I hung up, a profound shift occurred within me. I realized I was no longer afraid. These people had taken my husband. They'd threatened a child. They tried to intimidate us into silence. But silence wasn't an option anymore. It was time to fight. The courthouse was eerily quiet when we arrived, our hearing scheduled before regular sessions began. Travis had arranged for a private entrance to avoid any unwanted attention. Judge Winter's chambers were wood-paneled and austere, a setting that felt incredibly heavy. She watched impassively as we took our seats. Across from us sat 3 men in expensive suits, Westlake's formidable legal team, led by a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Marshall. "This is highly irregular," Marshall began, her voice crisp. "An emergency hearing based on speculative claims. I've reviewed the initial evidence, Counselor," Judge Winters interrupted, her voice firm, "and I find sufficient cause for concern." "Proceed." Travis presented our case methodically, walking the judge through the damning documentation, Ben's meticulous records, the forged consent forms, payment trails showing money flowing through shell companies, and finally, the chilling audio recording of Ben being threatened. "What we have here, Your Honor," Travis concluded, "is a systematic pattern of exploitation. Vulnerable families with children suffering from rare diseases are targeted, coerced, and then trapped in a program that goes far beyond ethical medical research." "These are serious allegations," Judge Winters said, her gaze fixed on Marshall. "What does the fund have to say?" Marshall rose, composed. "Your Honor, Westlake Health Innovation Fund operates under strict FDA oversight. Our clinical trials have saved countless lives, including Claire Allen's. Yes, there are confidentiality requirements. Yes, we protect our intellectual property. But the suggestion that we're conducting some kind of sinister experiment is absurd." "Then explain Phase 3. I burst out, unable to stay silent. Marshall's eyes flickered to me, a hint of disdain. Phase 3 is standard terminology in clinical trials. It simply refers to the final testing phase before FDA approval. Then why won't you tell the families what it involves?" Travis countered, seizing the moment. "Proprietary information," Marshall replied smoothly. "But I assure you it's both safe and effective." Sophie took the stand next, nervous but utterly determined. She explained how she'd initially refused to enroll Claire, how she'd later discovered Ben had forged her consent, and how Claire had been abruptly removed from treatment when questions began to surface. "Has Claire benefited from these treatments?" Judge Winters asked, her voice gentle. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, dramatically. She was so sick before. Now she's like any other child her age." "Yet you're here opposing the fund?" "Because I want her treatment to continue," Sophie said, her voice shaking with emotion, "but I want to know what they're really doing to my daughter. I want transparency. I want a choice." Marshall's cross-examination was brutal, a calculated attempt to paint Sophie as an unfit mother who had neglected Claire's care until Ben had to step in. "Isn't it true that you refused proven treatment for your daughter's condition?" she demanded, her tone accusatory. "I refused experimental treatment without proper information," Sophie corrected, her voice steady now. "And now that your daughter has been helped, now that she's thriving, you want to destroy the very organization that saved her?" "I want to protect her," Sophie said simply, her gaze firm. "From whatever you're not telling us about Phase 3. When my turn came, I took a deep, fortifying breath and approached the stand. I explained everything, how I discovered Ben's secret, the files he'd left behind, the chilling nurse's whispers on the day he died. "Mr. Parker died of a stroke," Marshall interrupted, her voice sharp. "A tragic but natural event unrelated to his work with Westlake." "Then why was his room locked immediately after?" I countered, my voice rising. "Why were his personal effects tampered with? Why did a nurse call to tell me he had been conscious and asking for me, a fact the hospital vehemently denied?" I read from Ben's letter, the words echoing in the hushed room, asterisk, "They didn't want her to live." I fought it. I did everything I could. Asterisk, the courtroom fell silent, heavy with unspoken questions. "You've presented a compelling narrative, Mrs. Parker," Marshall said finally, her tone dismissive. "But it's just that, a narrative constructed by a grieving widow desperate to find meaning in her husband's death." I looked directly at her, then explained the impossible timeline of Ben's text, sent after he was declared brain dead. Before Marshall could even respond, the courtroom door opened. Tanya, the nurse who had called me, slipped in quietly and took a seat in the back. Travis noticed her immediately, a slow, dawning realization on his face. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing out, "we have an additional witness." Tanya approached the stand, her hands clasped tightly, her courage palpable. "My name is Tanya Williams. I was the attending nurse when Ben Parker died." She looked at me, her eyes meeting mine, then added, "or when he was supposed to have died." A stunned murmur rippled through the courtroom. "What do you mean, supposed to have died?" Judge Winters asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Mr. Parker suffered a stroke, yes, but he had regained consciousness early that morning. He was agitated, insisting on speaking to his wife. He kept saying something about evidence, about children being in danger." She took a shaky breath. Then Dr. Harrison arrived. "He's not even an ICU doctor. He ordered everyone out. Said he needed to perform an assessment." When we were allowed back in, Mr. Parker was gone. "Are you suggesting foul play, Miss Williams?" Judge Winters asked, her tone razor-sharp. "I'm stating what I saw, Your Honor." Several of us raised concerns. 2 days later, our employment records were flagged for procedural violations. Most of us were offered transfers or severance packages. "This is outrageous," Marshall interjected, rising indignantly. "Unfounded accusations." "Miss Marshall," Judge Winters said firmly, cutting her off. "I suggest you allow the witness to finish." Tanya continued, describing how Ben's room had been immediately sealed, how his personal effects had been inventoried by fund security rather than hospital staff, how the entire timeline of his death had been altered in official records. By the time she finished, even Diane Marshall's icy composure had visibly cracked. Judge Winters called a brief recess, the tension in the room almost unbearable. She returned 30 minutes later, her face set, and delivered her decision. "What happened here," she began, her voice resonating through the silent chamber, "represents a profound breach of trust, medical, legal, and ethical. While I cannot yet determine the full extent of wrongdoing, the evidence presented today warrants immediate action." She ordered Claire's immediate reinstatement into treatment under court-monitored supervision. The fund was required to provide complete documentation of all protocols, especially Phase 3. An independent medical review board would oversee Claire's care. Additionally, she concluded, her gaze firm, "I am ordering a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding Benjamin Parker's death. Miss Williams, you will be granted full whistleblower protection." As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange, unsettling mixture of victory and crushing grief. The truth was finally coming to light. But it couldn't bring Ben back. Outside, Sophie enveloped me in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her voice, "for fighting for her when you didn't have to." I hugged her back, realizing that in this moment, the invisible walls between us, between Ben's two separate secret worlds, had finally, completely crumbled. 3 months passed. Spring turned to summer, bringing with it a gradual, tentative return to something resembling normalcy. Though nothing, I knew, would ever be truly normal again. The investigation into Westlake expanded rapidly beyond Claire's case. Other families came forward, each with similar, heart-wrenching stories of coercion and secrecy. Phase 3, it turned out, was even more monstrous than we'd imagined. It involved genetic modifications that went far beyond mere treatment, enhancements designed to create children with unnaturally heightened immune responses that could then be replicated for military applications. Ben's death was officially reclassified as under investigation. The hospital administration was overhauled, with several key figures resigning amidst allegations of collusion with the fund. I returned to teaching, finding a fragile solace in the comforting routine of my classroom. My 4th graders knew only that Mrs. Parker had lost her husband and had been helping a sick little girl. Their simple compassion, handmade cards, extra hugs, slowly, gently healed parts of me I hadn't even known were broken. In June, I published a piece in the local paper, giving it the title, "The Secrets My Husband Died With and Why I Forgive Him." I wrote about Ben's impossible choices, about the crushing moral complexities of desperate love, and about how good people, pushed to their limits, can make terrible decisions for what they believe are the right reasons. I cannot condone what Ben did, I wrote, the deception, the forgery. But I understand why he did it. He saw a child suffering and chose action over inaction, even at great personal cost. In the end, he tried to make it right. That, I believe, is what defines us. Not our mistakes, but our attempts to correct them. The article was picked up by national media, and other whistleblowers contacted Travis, sharing similar, horrifying stories from different medical research facilities. What had begun as one family's isolated nightmare was now exposing a systematic, terrifying pattern that stretched across the country. Sophie brought Claire to visit me one sunny afternoon. I had been hesitant about meeting her, this child who had been the silent center of so much pain and secrecy. But when she bounded up my front steps, a brightly colored drawing clutched in her small hand, all reservations vanished. "This is for you," she said, handing me the paper with a wide, innocent smile. "Mom says you helped make the bad doctors go away." The drawing showed 3 stick figures, nestled inside a brightly colored heart. They were labeled Mom, me, and Miss Emma. "It's beautiful," I said, kneeling to her level, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Claire." She had Ben's smile, his curious eyes. But she was entirely her own person, vibrant, resilient, and beautifully untouched by the adult battles that had raged around her. As Claire explored my backyard, giggling at a ladybug, Sophie and I sat on the porch steps. "The new treatment protocol is working," Sophie said, a profound relief in her voice. "No more secret injections or unexplained procedures, just straightforward medicine, fully documented." "Good," I said, "that's so good." She looked at me sideways. "You didn't have to help us. After what Ben did, lying to you all those years, you could have walked away." I thought about it, I admitted, a small, wry smile touching my lips. "For about 5 seconds. What changed your mind?" I watched Claire as she discovered a butterfly in my garden, her face lighting up with pure wonder. "At first," I said, "I was helping Ben. Finishing what he started. Now," I gestured toward Claire, her bright, innocent presence a beacon. "Now, I'm helping her." Rita's investigative series on Westlake went viral, leading to congressional hearings on unethical medical research practices. Families across the country, now empowered, began scrutinizing the fine print of clinical trials their children were enrolled in. Tanya received multiple offers to return to her nursing position, but she declined. "Some bridges can't be unburned," she told me when we met for coffee. "But I don't regret speaking up." "Even though it cost you your career?" She smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "It gave me something better. Peace of mind." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Ben would be proud of what you've done." 1 year after Ben's death, I finally removed my wedding ring. It caught the light as I slipped it off, the gold band a symbol of both promises kept and promises profoundly broken. I placed it gently in a small wooden box alongside Ben's last, desperate letter. "Goodbye doesn't mean forgetting," I whispered to the empty room. I joined a local advocacy group for medical transparency and patient rights, using my painful experience to help other families navigate the complex, often dangerous world of clinical trials and experimental treatments. It wasn't the life I had planned, not by a long shot, but it had purpose. Meaning. On the anniversary of Ben's death, I visited his grave alone. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates. It said nothing of the complicated man he had been, the loving husband, the secret father, the reluctant conspirator, the final whistleblower. I placed fresh flowers against the stone, then sat on the grass beside it. "I found the truth, Ben," I said to the quiet cemetery, "and I still love you. But now," I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the immense weight of the past year lifting, just slightly. "Now, I get to breathe again." As I walked back to my car, I thought about the many versions of truth I had discovered since that day in the hospital corridor. The truth about Ben, the truth about Claire, and the truth about what people will do, both good and bad, in the name of love and survival. He died with secrets, yes, but he also died trying, desperately, to fix them. And in the wreckage he left behind, In the ashes of our life, I found the strength, not just to survive, but to truly begin again. So, I have to ask you, what would you do if the truth about someone you loved was hidden behind a wall of whispers and lies? Could you find the courage to tear it down? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know. Thanks for watching, take care, and good luck.